It's a good day, it seems, to be an Arsenal fan because not only is transfer news rolling and the Mikel Merino and Nketiah stories seem to be coming towards a positive conclusion, but there's even a forward being linked to the club. Maybe. We'll discuss that and more in today's Arsenal transfer show. Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys and girls for another episode of what is the Arsenal Transfer Show, joining you every single morning at 8 a.m. UK time. Thank you as always for joining me and making this a part of your morning routines. It is incredibly appreciated. I hope you've had a fantastic week up to this point, and of course forwards as well. Good morning to those joining us in the chat box. I hope you've had a fantastic week and I hope you're doing good and well. Natty Tom, Rich, Yandani, we've got Rich, we've got Jamil, Ray, Stephen, Keith, John, Steve, Mark, we've got Mason, Keith, Ray, Z. Keith is very frequent in the chat box this morning. Ray, Rich, we've got Granddaddy Good of Paul, we've got John and Carlton and Barry, we've got Rob, we've got Just John, and Carl, and plenty of the usual and unusual faces in the chat box as well. And welcome to some new listeners. I've noticed in the last few days jumping into the chat and saying hello. This is the first time being here live. I know that we may have gained a few new friends. I appeared on James from AFTV's Goonerverse show the other day with Babs and Sharoy. It was a really good one, actually. I recommend you go and check it out. If you just go and search on YouTube. I mean, James is fantastic anyways, as I've always mentioned, if you enjoy anyone with kind of a, an objective, grounded view and a reasoned approach to looking at Arsenal. It doesn't mean that he's a carbon copy of myself, but far from that, where you disagree on things. In fact, he started off the show with an apology, which I appreciated. But I reckon you head over to the Gooniverse and check out and subscribe to James's channel and watch the most recent one, which is Transfers Get Moving and Villa Park Preview. That is the show. In fact, I'll leave a link to it just in the live chat box for you to check out if you should so wish to go and give that a look. But we're here this morning, of course, to round up all the latest Arsenal transfer news. And I'm looking forward to this one because there's a lot of really good stuff to discuss. Do make sure you drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you're new around here with those notifications turned on so you never miss a show. Of course, we try and reach 1K every single day on the channel. So if you could be ever so kind, do drop a like and help us in that direction. Right, let's start with Amario Cozier-Duberry and Ruel Walters. Now, I should tell you that, of course, a number of you in the chat box have been asking about this, the compensation. You've been wanting an answer to this question. So what I did was I did a little bit digging around this story, and I can tell you now that both Arsenal and Brighton and Arsenal and Luton, it seems, have failed to come to an agreement between themselves over compensation fees for both players. And therefore, this deal will now go to a tribunal. Both deals are going through a tribunal, which means, of course, that dependent upon a number of factors, a tribunal will decide how much both Brighton and Luton will pay Arsenal. Now, I can tell you that previous tribunals of a similar nature have typically seen clubs paid over in excess of £500,000. So that's kind of what we're in the ballpark. I have been kind of told to kind of estimate around those figures. It could reach a bit higher than that, but these are the figures that are expected to be kind of discussed. Sometimes, of course, it can also be dependent upon how many appearances they then make for their new clubs. So if they make senior appearances for their new sides, they may have to pay Arsenal more. So that's how those tribunal situations work. And Arsenal also made yesterday £2 million because McGuinness, who previously was at the Arsenal Academy and was sold to Cardiff with a 20% sell-on clause, well, he has joined Luton Town on loan, on a permanent deal for 10 million. So that 20% sell-on clause of Mark McGuinness's move to Cardiff has seen Arsenal earn around £2 million. Of course, that adds on to the Amari Hutchinson sell-on clause that we had, which earned just around £4 million. So we're adding up the fees. I mean, if you add that, of course, to Mika Biereth, it was about £4 million. Brooke Norton-Cuffy was around £3.5 million, including add-ons. You're getting close to, more than 10 million quid on players just through sell-on clauses. We got the 2 million from Leno's add-ons as well from that sale a few years ago because Fulham managed to stay up again. Arsenal are bringing in the cash this window, and it's not going to stop there because Charlie Patino is expected to be confirmed as a Deportivo de La Coruña player for £1 million. It's not a price tag that's going to bring excitement or shock or awe to any Arsenal fans. In fact, I imagine many Arsenal fans will be asking a question why it's so low. It does have a significant sell-on clause, I am told, included in that deal. Significant sell-on clauses tend to be between 15 and 30%, so I'd expect it to be within that range. However, I know that a lot of Arsenal fans still will be asking the question, why? I mean, I can answer your question to a degree. He only had 1 year left remaining on his contract. Deportivo de La Coruña, I should point out, are a club that in the last 5 years have spent the most on Charlie Patino. He is their most expensive signing in the last 5 years. They are a second-tier Spanish team now, no longer in La Liga with the likes of Lucas Perez back in his prime, although I believe Lucas Perez is now there again. Yes, this is the interest. This is the level. Arsenal got him 2 good loan deals. He played 67 times in the Championship across 2 seasons, which is a really good level to showcase your ability to develop and to get minutes. And 67 appearances, with a lot of them, of course, still being substitute appearances as well, is still a lot. And it wasn't enough, those performances, to convince seemingly any Championship sides to come in for the midfielder. I think that Patino has suffered a lot from overhyping a young age, and now will of course move to Spain, where of course he's got links to, and will hope to restart, to kick on afresh, and to build at that level before, we hope at least, making another switch to another team, perhaps for a lot more money that Arsenal will then benefit from with that sell-on clause. I should point out that Ryan Taylor, of course, I always say Ryan Taylor Sport because that's his Twitter handle, but Ryan Taylor from The Express broke this story, did a fantastic job on it yesterday. Now, this is kind of for me, this is the biggest story of yesterday. There's other stories we've got to talk about, but for me, this is great. So David Ornstein broke the story yesterday morning that Arsenal are close to agreeing a deal with Nottingham Forest for Eddie Nketiah. The expectation that Arsenal wanted between 30 and 35 million pounds. Well, further reports have come out suggesting that figure is indeed 30 million quid. That Arsenal seemingly will get that price tag that they have been holding out for Eddie Nketiah, which is bloody-tastic that this deal seemingly is heading towards a conclusion, and that I and so many others set their bar far, far, far too low when it came to Eddie Nketiah. And Edu and Arsenal stood firm on their valuation, and it seems, we hope, and it's not done until it's done, of course, but it seems that this deal is heading in the direction of a £30 million agreement with Nottingham Forest. Suggestions were that he was looking to try and complete his medical this week, which is obviously very good. But that, yeah, I mean, when you add them up, 34 million for Smith Rowe, 30 million for Nketiah, a deal that could rise to as high as 34 million pounds plus a sell-on clause for Balogun, 25 million pounds for Joe Willock, 35, maybe slightly less than that, million pounds for Alex Iwobi. You're looking at the academy producing well over 100 million pounds worth of players in sales, and a lot of that has happened in the last 2 years, which provides not only just profit for Arsenal, but pure profit. And what I mean by that is, of course, there is no transfer fees associated with these deals. So all the money that is made for these players is just the money, and it is just looking very good on Arsenal's books, which is obviously a very, very good thing for Arsenal. Meanwhile, Aaron Ramsdale is said to be moving closer to a loan move away from the club. Hope that there might be a permanent deal to do for Ramsdale is kind of somewhat withering. John Cross of the Mirror reporting that Wolves do intend to try and take Ramsdale on loan, and this option to buy that they are keen on would be of a sum of £25 million. If we got £25 million for Aaron Ramsdale, I'd be okay with it. I wanted 30, but £25 million, I think, if indeed that was the option included in the loan deal, is still a good amount of money for Arsenal to try and recoup from the player. But indeed, if Ramsdale does leave, Arsenal will look to replace him with Joan Garcia, the Espanyol and Spanish Olympic goalkeeper, who has a £25 million, €30 million buyout clause. We don't know if indeed that will be the figure that Arsenal has to pay. It seems to be that Espanyol will indeed demand that figure for Joan Garcia. Personal terms have already been agreed between Arsenal and the 23-year-old Spaniard, and he is considered to be excited about the prospect of joining Arsenal, even being the number 2 behind David Raya. So Ramsdale's fee would effectively, if indeed it was made permanent next summer, pay for Garcia, if indeed the option would be activated by that Wolves or another club that agreed to that £25 million option as well. So it's almost a like for like, if you will. Mikel Merino, we're not done, and we're not done here either. This is not the last story to discuss today, because Mikel Merino, positive talks have taken place in London yesterday between Arsenal and the Real Sociedad president, Joaquin Aperribe, and it is said that this deal is now edging towards a £34 million agreement, €40 million, €35 million plus €5 million in add-ons is expected to be the price tag at this moment in time. More than I think Arsenal initially wanted to pay, but it's a case at this point in the window of getting this deal done. And it seems that that is going to be the case. Mikel Merino did not train with Sociedad yesterday. He is not expected to train unless there's a big kind of crack in this deal and it starts to fall apart. But that has not been the case so far. But we seem to be edging towards this being a matter of time for Mikel Merino. Really good price tag still. He's a player that is, of course, if he was under a long-term contract, would be worth far, far more than that, and brings Arsenal immediate quality and a starting figure as well. That's what's so impressive, I think, about this window, is that at the start of it, we talked so much about how Arsenal were going to struggle to add players that start for us. Well, we've managed to add 2 in Calafiori and potentially Mikel Merino, who, of course, could, by the end of this season, be starters for Arsenal. In fact, Mikel Merino, I think, comes in for Partey, playing that left 8 role, and Rice moves back into the number 6. It's a very, very, very exciting time to be an Arsenal fan. Now, you've wanted a forward link? Well, we've got a forward link, because Ademola Lookman is being linked with a move to Arsenal. According to Italian journalist Alfredo Pedula, Ademola Lookman, the former Charlton, Everton, Leipzig attacking player, is indeed said to be a target for Arsenal in the latter stages of this window. Now, always worth prefacing. News coming out from Italy. Always worth taking it with a bit of a pinch of salt. But there is obviously optimism. It's one that I'm going to do a little bit of digging on today for sure, and try to find out anything on our side of things, if there's any realism in this deal. But let's talk about this in more of a hypothetical scenario. Ademola Lookman, the suggestions are, would cost €50 million, which is around £42 million, same as what Chelsea paid for João Felix. But it would also need to include Jakub Kiwior in the deal to Atalanta. Atalanta were a team that was said to be keen on Kiwior earlier on in the window, so it would make sense that indeed they might be keen to bring in Kiwior between now and the end of the window. I am less enthused about that element of the deal. I think that Jakub Kiwior should stay, and I think that that we should just try and, if it is indeed a deal to do, to sign him purely through monetary means. Now, I can already see some people who clearly haven't watched Lookman judging him in the chat box. And the reason why I know that people haven't watched him is because you're seeing comments like this from Mikel James, who says another Reece Nelson. Now, if you want to know the difference between Ademola Lookman and Reece Nelson, you need look no further than his recent records. This is a player, of course, that came through in England initially. As I said, played games that my other half will know very much more about than I will from his time playing with Charlton and coming through the youth system at Charlton. He moved to Everton, played for Leipzig, went on loan to the likes of Fulham and to Leicester before he's finally settled in Italy with Atalanta, where his scoring record has gone through the roof. He's averaging a goal rate better than 1 in 3, and his record playing at this level is very, very good now, finding his feet. And what's really interesting about this is that he is a versatile forward. Whilst just in the majority of his games in the course of his career have been 98 times on the left, 62 times on the right, actually he's now played 86 games centrally, either as a second striker or even as a centre forward. Last season, he managed 17 goals and 10 assists across all competitions. And if you're wondering if he's a guy that can deliver in big moments, he scored and assisted in the 3-0 win over Marseille in the second leg of the Europa League semi-final. And then he went and scored a hat-trick against Bayer Leverkusen in a 3-0 win in the final of the Europa League. Not only that, but he scored last season against Fiorentina, got an assist against Inter Milan, scored away at Napoli, scored twice in a 3-2 win over AC Milan, and scored again and got an assist in the final day against Fiorentina as well. In the Coppa Italia, he managed to get a goal and an assist in the second leg semi-final of the Italy Cup against Fiorentina again as well, and played the full 90 minutes of the final, which sadly Atalanta lost 1-0 to Juventus. This is a guy that can deliver. He scored also against a very good Bologna side as well, it's worth pointing out, last season as well, who finished in the Champions League qualification places. He ranks in the 85th percentile for non-penalty goals against forwards and the 99th percentile of non-penalty goals against other attacking midfielders and wingers. He's excellent on the ball. He's good at carrying it forwards, and indeed can rank amongst the best when it comes to playing in that centre-forward role. But it is that versatility that I think would be the most attractive trait, potentially. The least attractive trait around Lookman is probably his age profile. He's currently 26 years of age, but he will be turning 27 in the next couple of months. And of course, that means that his price tag and wages would probably be significant. That said, his wages are only around £40,000 per week. It is estimated at Atalanta, so that would go up. And of course, he would be open to the striker as well. I think there's a lot of positives to this deal. I'm probably going to write a piece about him a little bit later on today for football.london, so it's worth giving that a read. You can follow me, of course, at Tom Cantor Media on social media. And I'm trying to be more on Threads as well. You can find me at Tom Cantor 94 on Threads. I'm trying to post a lot more over there, but I do forget sometimes. It's weird getting out the habit of just being on Twitter. But yes, it's a deal that I think is really interesting, and he's a hard worker. He's a good technical player. He can score goals and get assists as well. And of course, of all the options, there aren't too many when it comes to adding attacking players that can play across the front three. And I'd completely kind of not even thought about Ademola Lookman as well. He's a player that's not going to excite your average fan, I don't think, because he's not called Lookmadinho. But he is a player that has delivered now at a very good level in Serie A for a very good team in Atalanta, and of course has become a Europa League winning player by scoring a hat-trick in that final against Leverkusen. So he's a player that I don't think people should write off immediately, but he's also a player that I'm going to be very cautious about because I don't know how real the link is at this moment in time. But he certainly raises the floor of the team in terms of being better than Nelson, better than Nketiah, and he can play, of course, across those front three positions too. Right. I mean, that was a lot. There's a lot of stories. And I think the big takeaway, of course, from that part one is that cogs are turning. Things are moving. Things are happening. Arsenal are making money. Arsenal are spending money. And that's the position we want Arsenal to be in. And I want you to spend money as well. But if you are going to spend money, you need to be on something that's going to give you the safety and security that you need in line. And that thing, of course, is, as you very much well know, is NordVPN, which brings you the safety and security online while surfing the net, keeping what you want to do safe, keeping what you're doing behind closed doors like a Mikel Arteta friendly. And not only that, but if you go to nordvpn.com/Gooner, you can get yourself a significant discount off a 1 or a 2-year plan. nordvpn.com/Gooner, that is. And you get 4 months extra thrown in free on top of that 2-year deal. And if you're not happy with the service for whatever reason, you get a 30-day money-back guarantee on top of that as well. Right, let's go to part 2. And your questions right after this. Righty then. Shall we jump into the chat box and get some of your thoughts on today's stories? I should say that across both social media and YouTube, currently there is more than 2,000 people tuning into today's show, which is brilliant. Thank you so much for the kind support that you continue to bring to the channel. We recently hit 59,000 subscribers, and we are very much strongly on the way to 60K. We set ourselves a 2024 target of seeing if we can get the Emirates Stadium capacity, which is 60,704 seats, by the end of the year. And all of those watching are certainly helping us towards that. If you're listening on X, though, I always say, I know we stream on X, and we stream because we want to open this up to more and more people. If you're watching on X, close your X app down, open up YouTube, and come and watch us over there. It helps us out a lot more, and you can, of course, jump into the chat box and ask your questions in part 2 as well. We prioritize questions on YouTube. Ashley says, is Lookman the winger for you? Not for me. I see Lookman and Eze's traits in Saka, Leao, Jesus, dribbling and carrying in tight spaces. 3 out of 4 of that winger is our squad, and we need one speedster in terms of Martinelli. I'd go for Sterling and Koeman. It's interesting that you choose Sterling over Lookman. I struggle with that. The reason why I struggle with that is because when you look at Sterling's recent kind of performances, they're not great. His finishing's not great. His contributions aren't great. His consistency's not great. His injury record's not great. I really struggle with the Sterling shout. I think he's just a name. And whereas I know that Lookman isn't necessarily a name, that people struggle with that. If you want to know Lookman's injury record, by the way, last season he missed just 3 games because of an ankle sprain. Season before that, he did miss 7 games because of a hamstring issue. In 21-22, he didn't miss a single game. For Fulham in 2021, he missed just 2 games because of a muscle issue. And in 19-20, he missed 4 games because of 3 different minor issues. So injury record is fine. Nothing there that's really standing out either. RRDM says, Lookman had a great African Cup of Nations as well. He has a chance to be voted the African Footballer of the Year. He can offer a lot in the front line. Again, worth putting that out. Aditya says, isn't Lookman a better player from the left? Well, he's playing a lot through the middle recently, but he can play, if you go back onto that slide, which I had on the screen a second ago, can play very comfortably across all 3 positions. 62 games on the right, 98 games on the left, and 86 games through the middle. So a very, very versatile player indeed. Jimmy says, I know it's easier said than done, but just put the money down for Kudus. Great player, young, competition for Saka and Premier League proven. What do you think? I don't think you're going to be able to stump up the money, Jimmy, that West Ham are going to accept at this stage. His release clause of £84 million has expired until next summer. It doesn't reopen again until next summer. So West Ham have absolutely no need to sell, and they don't really need the money either. Mr. Thugi says 50 million in Kivior means the whole package is around 75 to 80. And if we add the 40 for Merino, that's like 120 million. Feels like we could have got better players for that, perhaps, if it happens, of course. I mean, you are turning Kivior into money, which isn't as necessarily as clear cut as what you think. I see where you're going with it. But I do think that I am against the whole Kivior thing. I'd be offering 50 million for Lookman and just 50 million for Lookman. That's what I'd be doing. The Kivior one, I don't like. I'd keep him. I really think we need depth in the defence. John says, I love it when Arsenal sign a player that everyone laughs about and then that player proves them all wrong. Havertz is a prime example. I actually did a bit of a tweet this morning asking for some people's thoughts on this. And because good friend of the show, Mems, who hasn't been on the show in years and done podcasting in years, but we do love Mems, did a tweet after the team of the year for the PFA was released. For those that missed yesterday's show, that was Raya, Saliba, Van Dijk, Gabriel, Carl Walker, Rodri, Rice, Erdegaard, Haaland, Foden, and Watkins. And Mems tweeted saying, this is the problem. Strong in all areas apart from the forward line. Until we get a proven striker who will get 25 goals a season, we won't win the league. This is the area that should have been addressed first. Now, I don't agree with this point of view because I tweeted saying I still struggle with this. We scored more goals than the Invincibles last season. That's a point I will continue to make because it's relevant. How can we be strong in all areas apart from the forward line just because the 3 guys who got into that team of the year got 90 goal contributions between them and made it in, of course, ahead of Saka as well? For the record, our own centre forward, Havertz, got 15 goal contributions in 13 Premier League games playing as centre forward. Just going to say that one more time for the people at the back that didn't hear it. 15 goal contributions, 8 goals, 7 assists in 13 games playing as a centre forward for Arsenal. So if you do some quick estimations and extrapolate 38 games in a Premier League season, 13 games as centre forward, 15 goal contributions, you're looking at just under 45 goal contributions if that had carried on. If it had managed to be consistent and continue that type of form playing at centre forward, you were looking at a huge number of goals. Now, I don't think it's realistic to expect that, but I do think it's realistic to expect that he could have at least maybe doubled that in 3 times the amount of games as well. He only had 1 penalty in that whole time as well. So, and that was the one against. And to be fair, I don't even know the penalty counts because the penalty was when he was playing in midfield. So I don't think the penalty's included in that. So 8 goals, 7 assists in 13 games in the Premier League as a centre forward last season, Havertz got. And he's already off the mark this season with a goal and an assist as well. So I really do think that this whole thing about Arsenal, the 25 goal a season striker, we might already have one, guys. So let's let him cook. Speaking of cook, here's Peter Cook with a question. Tom, would you be concerned that Lookman did not pull up any trees during his time in England? It's not like he was a teenager. He was playing here into his early 20s. Not necessarily, Peter, because he was, of course, playing at a really struggling Everton team, which is worth pointing out. He played, of course, that was 5 years ago he left. So he was only 21 when that happened. So obviously a very young age and a really struggling Everton side. So not really. And if we're talking about that, then we wouldn't sign Mikel Merino because he didn't exactly pull up trees when he was at Newcastle either. So I think that's worth pointing out as well. SA says, why do you think that Mikel/Edu is really intent on getting Merino? It could be well wrong, but he doesn't look like he solves our left-hand side progression and fluidity. This is according, of course, to FB Ref. Arteta seems absolutely enamored with Merino and seems to think that he is going to be an important player. He does rank in the 76th percentile for progressive passes, 6.1 in per 90, 6.1 progressive passes per 90. He does play in that position specifically, it's worth pointing out. So this is an area that he does excel in, and it is where his main position is. He's ranked as being one of the highest rated midfielders in La Liga and has been for the last few seasons. So there is a lot to like about Mikel Merino. It's also his threat in both areas. Defensively, he's strong, wins duels like an absolute monster, but he's also very good at going forwards and getting into the box. So he adds quality on both ends of the field, which none of our other centre midfielders really do. Rice is better than he used to be in the final third, but for me, his best position is still in his tackling and his interceptions and his game reading. And I think I'd prefer him as being our Rodri. That's what I want to see from Declan Rice. And then if you look at someone like Jorginho, far more defensive focused, Odegaard, far more offensive focused. We need someone who can do both. We need that real box to box. And Mikel Merino is indeed, for me, that box-to-box player. Carlos is waiting for news on Arteta's contract. There was Sky Sports actually reported yesterday. They claimed that Mikel Arteta is indeed close to agreeing one, or there's kind of a confidence that will happen. It's always been my understanding that there's been such incredible high confidence from Arsenal side of things that there won't be any issues with Arteta's contract, and it's a case of of when rather than if when it comes to Arteta's new deal. Razor says Havertz and Jesus are not enough as centre-forward options. That's good because we've also got Leandro Trossard who can play there. Jesus is injury-prone and Havertz is in a purple patch. When we say he's in a purple patch, I don't know what constitutes a purple patch. How long does a purple patch have to last before they're just good? Do you know what I mean? Because he was good for this entire year. He's been good. So how long does a purple patch last before they just get called good? I'll be curious. I imagine that for people being a bit critical of Havertz, it must last as long as Havertz has been good. But the whole purple patch thing doesn't stack up for me. A purple patch is like a couple months. Havertz has been good all year. So yeah, I don't agree there necessarily. Mason says, thank you, Tom, for doing the channel. It's really helped me over the last 2 years. Thanks, Mason. I'm really glad it's been there for you and you've enjoyed it here. We've got, as I always say, the best community on the platform over here. So thank you. There's over 1,800 of you. Right, we've been going for half an hour now, and I'm willing to go for another 20 minutes more. I don't start work till 9. There's 372 of you watching on X still, right? And there's 1,800 of you listening on YouTube. This would be great if we could tip the YouTube numbers over to 2,000. Be one of the people that does it. Hop over from X, jump onto YouTube, watch us there, and help us to try and get to 2,000 people watching on YouTube. That'd be pretty crazy. And Gunner USA says, I'm new here. Welcome. Thank you so much for tuning in. Let's scroll up a little bit more, shall we? Mark says, Tom, in 22-23, Odegaard and Martinelli scored a lot. Not so much last campaign. With the changes that we made, do you see them finding their past scoring ways? I do. Mark, I think it's a really good question. And you have to ask the question of why did that change? I think, of course, the introduction of Havertz had a part to play there. I definitely think that he had a role within that. That's really important to consider as well. But what I do think is that we were in a position with both of those players that they were far more integral at that point during that season. Jesus was missing for a long time because of his injury, so other players had to step up. Our centre-forward position was taken up by Nketiah or Trossard on a number of games as well. And if indeed they can discover that form again, or they can be that influenceable in a team too, and you add that to Saka and Havertz, all of a sudden you're getting a team that's not only going to beat the Invincibles record again, but beats our highest record that we set last season of 91 Premier League goals. Danny says, Tom, I'm calling it Havertz is going to score 25 goals and get 17 assists this season. If I'm wrong, I approve the signing of Mbappe at the end of the year. Oh, how really pushing the boat out there, Danny. really going for it. Boss says, if Sterling terminates and would be a free, and if he is free, why not have him as a backup for Saka? Because I don't want him. It's as simple as that. He's not good enough. Raise your standards. That's what I say. What's that famous phrase? Raise your standards. I don't want to sign Sterling on a free contract, paying him 300,000 pounds per week. No, thank you. I don't want to do that. I think we're much better off trying to find a loan for maybe a Coman, or even investing in somebody like a Lookman, than going and spending on a player whose stock has never been lower, and who, I mean, to be honest, like that's a player at this stage of his career that's not like Havertz. Havertz at Chelsea was, a 23, 24-year-old player that had a lot of potential still to give and a lot of his prime years still to come, and we're showing that. Sterling turns 30 this season. It's completely different, and I just wouldn't go for it. Clive says, great detail on the youth numbers, Tom. Thanks, Clive. Appreciate your kind words, mate, as always. John says, if Nketiah does go, then we definitely need to get a replacement. That's when all the links start getting exciting. But until such time, I think we need to wait. We absolutely have to wait until we move on Nketiah. That's really, really important. Derek says, hi, mate. First live in a bit. You're getting better. Where do you think Nelson goes? Any left field signings for you? Nelson, I mean, keep an eye on Leicester. They missed out on Hlojek. They're having a few issues in the transfer market. They are interested in Jimenez, but I don't think that's going to happen. So maybe keep an eye on Leicester between now and the end of the summer window. That might be one to look at. And any left field side, I mean, Lookman's pretty left field. No one really was talking about him. So if he comes in, and it's a big if, because I don't know how real it is, we'll have to wait and see, I guess. Boss, is Lookman a pacey player? Yes, he's got plenty of speed. Izzy says, hi, Tom. Assuming Eddie leaves, is it possible to get Gyökeres? No, Izzy, I don't think so. As I've tried to make it very clear to people, centre forward is not one that you should really be banking on this summer. It just isn't a very likely scenario that happens. It really, really isn't. So I can't see us signing a centre forward. Even if Nketiah leaves, I don't think we'll sign a centre forward. I think you'll be happy with Havertz and Jesus and Trossard. The biggest argument that people have when it comes to us signing a centre forward and the fact we have to sign a centre forward is people assuming that Jesus gets injured. And if you make decisions on assumptions about injuries that will or will not happen, you're in a very dangerous area. So I'd recommend not doing that. And I really do think that it's dangerous to go, oh, Jesus will get injured. We don't know if he will. So don't panic buy a striker just because somebody might get injured when the market isn't that great. And obviously I don't see us spending like £84 million on a Gyökeres, because there's a release clause that has to be paid up top. So again, I really don't think that will happen. Razor says, I have a terrible feeling that we'll get someone from Chelsea on deadline day. Hey, the last two have been pretty good, Razor, so maybe you shouldn't be so scared. Rob says, what sound of 1,000 Arsenal content creators apologising? Eddie making millions. PS, 25 million for Ramsdale is too little. He played 2 seasons and was in the team of the season. Can't be less than Eddie. Edan says, Tom, would you take Jonathan David? 19 league goals last season and 1 year left on his contract. Could be a bit of a bargain. The Jonathan David's name has been around the block for a long time, and he's just never taken that step. And I start to ask the question: is there a reason why he's never taken that step? Why has nobody made that jump for Jonathan David yet? I'm not sure. I don't know why no one's made that jump. There were suggestions Chelsea were interested this summer. That never happened. I can't say I've been too attentive of him recently either. So not sure about that one. Mikel James saying not good enough. I think that's become your catchphrase, mate, at this stage. Bosses, I can't lie, Tom, but if we don't get a forward, I still don't think Jesus will cover him on the right. Jesus will come on and Martinelli will be happy. Will be a Saka backup. That's why I think that we'll go for a left winger. I think that Noneri needs to be talked about a bit as well. Like, we got this guy here who's left-footed, attacking player that can play as an attacking midfielder and as a right-sided player and a left-sided player as well, who needs minutes. And if you go and bring 2 forwards in, I think you are really stunting his pathway. And it's important that we do keep the pathway clear to a degree for Ethan Nwaneri. So I am only in favour of us bringing in 1 forward player. And for me, that would be a wide player. And I do think it's important that we do that. Andrea says, Jonathan David is too inconsistent for the price tag, and we know that Lille like to squeeze every possible penny out of teams as well. Baron says, honestly, I'd take Madueke over Sterling. I agree. I would take Madueke over Sterling. Rattle says, Jonathan David is good, but it will be like getting in another Nketiah or a Balogun. Mark says, I've watched Jonathan David in CONCACAF, which is a weak league, and in it, he's underperformed. So there's your thoughts, I guess, from the community on Jonathan David. And she says, hi, Tom. What are your thoughts on Stefan Borson? Not sure about the spelling, saying Arsenal PSR is very much on the very positive side and that they're just keeping us on our toes. He's a financial expert. I may have come across him. As I've been telling you, I've been saying this on the channel, Arsenal are not in financial peril, or the restrictions that are in place aren't like strangling us in any way. Arsenal are choosing this approach to the window because this is a window, as I've said time and time again till I've been blue in the face, is not that great. And it's not as forthcoming with options as we've seen in previous years. And Arsenal recognise that, and the people that are paid hundreds of thousands of pounds to recognise that, get that. And so they've taken this sustainable approach to the window, and it's working out pretty well for us, to be honest, because we're getting good money for our players. We're replacing them, by bringing in important figures like Calafiori and hopefully Merino as well, and maybe another forward. And we're utilising this market as best we can and not panic buying, which is something that Chelsea continue to do, and put their manager into a position where he says that I refuse to work with 20 of the players that are in the squad, which is just crazy. I respect it to a degree because I think he's obviously he has to prioritise the players that he wants to keep. And he's a new coach, so he's coming into a team of players that he's inherited. So I respect it. But it's the fact that he's been put into that position is a joke. It's not on Enzo Maresca. It's absolutely on Chelsea. And the sad thing is that a lot of fans of Arsenal would sadly have Arsenal operate in a similar way and spend hand over fist and overpay for players just to get them through the door. We don't. We're not about that. And there's a reason why we are where we are. Mark says the gossip sheets have been saying that Napoli, knowing Osimhen will leave, are starting to get desperate and the price is dropping. What do you make of those rumours? I think Napoli should be panicking. Napoli put a far too higher price tag on him at the start, and that has left them a bit high and dry in the market because Osimhen isn't worth 100 million euros. He's not worth 80 million euros. I think he's worth about 60 million quid. That's what I'd personally put on Osimhen as a price tag, between 60 and 70 million pounds. I think is what at a push, 70 million pounds is what I say that Osimhen's genuine value is. He's a player that had a disappointing season last season compared to the season before. He's a player that has had some off-field question marks against him as well recently with I think it was a coach of his as well. And I think that's really undermined Napoli's position with Osimhen. They're a very shrewd and stubborn negotiating side, and it's hurt them in the past, and it could hurt them again now. So I guess we'll see what happens on that front. I don't expect Arsenal to move for him, and as I've mentioned before, I'm not that keen. So yeah. Idan says Madueke could be available and we should consider him. Not the best option, but he is decent and could cost a fair price. Well, I mean, I saw, is it Liam Twomey was saying the other day, the Athletic writer, that Chelsea value him at 60 million now? Absolutely crazy. Absolutely ridiculous. Amarul Gooner says sustainability is important. I never want us to treat our players like Chelsea have treated theirs because we are a family. You're absolutely right, mate. Match says, Tom, is the comments from the Chelsea boss about having only 21 players the wildest thing you've ever heard a manager say? There's probably wilder things. Because to be honest, Matt, I think it's fair. In some ways, even though it's crazy, it's not on him. It's not his fault that he's working to those parameters. It's Chelsea's fault that he's working to that degree. And it's absolutely within Chelsea's ownership that they have created this problem. He has to say certain things. He has to play the PR game a little bit as the manager and has done that. But it's tricky there. Kuru says, why would Napoli be panicking? Couldn't they just send out a message to any slightly interested party saying Osimhen's now down to 60 million? I mean, I think you answered your own question there, Corey. Why would Napoli be panicking? Probably because they had a player they rated at £100 million, and then you've said drop the price by 40 million. Like that's why they're panicking. That's the panic that you've explained yourself. Sijan says, in addition to Mikel Merino and Lookman, not a bad for challenging this season, and it would be a good transfer window. Yeah, I'd be curious. Let me read out like a hypothetical balance sheet for you, and then give me a sensible rating. And I mean a rating in terms of like, consider the market, consider the difficulties, consider our own approach to the window. In Calafiori for 35 plus 7, let's estimate. It's considerably lower price tag than, you got to consider the prices as well, considerably lower than that £42 million. Mikel Merino in for £34 million. Let's hypothetically say Arsenal sign Lookman for 60 million, right? Let's just hypothetically put a price tag on it. They sell in. I love this. I've not even finished, and MJ's dropping a rating down. So I mean, you're dropping ratings in. I've not even finished. I've not even finished yet, MJ. So yeah, Calafiori, Moreno, and Lookman in. Spend about 120 million quid, let's say. Cross Jonky as well, dropping in ratings before we've even done it. Nketiah sold for 30 million. Smith Rowe sold for 34 million. Aaron Ramsdale loaned out with an option of 25 mil. Reece Nelson gets his sale, let's say 10 million. We brought in, obviously, Thomas Setford, Lucas Nygaard. Youth players have come in as well. We've brought a few other youth players that have not really been mentioned. We sold Patino and Beereth and Norton Cuffy for a combined near 10 million for the three of them. Yeah. If that's the window, how do we feel about that? Because I think if you get Lookman in on top of that, I'm edging slightly towards an 8. I'm edging towards an 8. And I was at a 5-6 before the Merino news situation dropped. So that's I think I'm edging towards an 8 at that point, which I'm happy with, very, very happy with. TNT says 6. What's funny about this, right, is before Merino and before potentially a forward, I was at a 5-6. And I struggled to think how people could be lower than a 5 before that. Because, like, for me, the 5 is the middle ground, right? 5 is like, because it's not a rating from 0 or minus 10 to 10. That's not what ratings are at. I'm forgetting Lokonga and Tavares' answer. Yes, I am. Thank you for pointing that out. Both of them have gone on loan. Tavares will be sold for around 5 million plus a sell-on clause next summer. So a rating is not from minus 10 to 10. A rating is from 0 to 10. And 5 is like your middle ground. 5 is like, okay. Less than 5 is where, for me, you're making mistakes. That you're making errors. Like, you're signing the wrong players. You're overspending on players. You're selling poorly. That's when I'd start go to 4-3-2-1. But Arsenal have added one of the best defenders from the European Championships in Calafiori, who had a very good season in Serie A, one of Serie A's best defenders last season. They might be adding one of the most consistent and highest rated midfielders in La Liga in Merino in his prime years. And we could, hypothetically, in this scenario, get a forward who scored a hat-trick in the European final last season and got 17 goals and 10 assists, and also is approaching his, if not already in his prime years. And then you've sold Eddie Nketiah for way more than the big critics said we would ever get for him. And you sold Smith Rowe for £34 million with an excess sell-on clause of more than 10%, plus all of the loans and obviously the youth players we've sold as well. And yet people are still saying 5-6. And in my head, I'm thinking, what on earth do you want? like what is it that actually would make you think, yeah, Arsenal have had a good window? Because if it's last summer's of 100 million on Declan Rice, let's be honest, last summer was a 9 out of 10. With the benefit of hindsight, last summer was 9 out of 10. Took us to within 2 points of Manchester City. If it was a 10 out of 10 window, maybe that 2-point gap would have been made up. Last summer, we broke our transfer record for an individual player and the most we've ever spent. We brought in Kai Havertz, and we got insanely unlucky with Jurriën Timber. Of course, arguably should be included in this window because he's going to feel like a new signing. And David Raya, of course, who became the Golden Glove winner and the PFA Goalkeeper of the Year. Yeah, I just still see. Maybe we're just different people. Maybe we're just never going to be the same. Now, that's fine. You know, if everybody was the same, it would be boring. It'd be really, really boring. But I would not want to live in that world. I really would not want to live in that world where I think a window of that caliber is a 6. As I just can't get my head around it. I really can't. At the moment, if Mikel Merino comes in, we're at like a 7. You know, for me, it's like a 7. If Mikel Merino is who all we sign and we sell Nketiah and we sell Smith Rowe, we've had basically a net neutral window. I'm looking at it being a 7. It's not an 8 because we didn't add a forward. It's not a 9 because we didn't add a transformative player. So it's a 7. But we didn't make mistakes. No, we didn't sign the wrong players. We didn't undersell the likes of Nketiah or Smith Rowe. So I can't go below a 5 because it wasn't bad. So if it's below a 5, it's bad. So I can't get my head around the pessimism. I almost wish I could kind of like transport people back to 8 years ago when we first started doing this show, and Arsenal were in a state of purgatory as a club. They weren't going anywhere. They were a sleeping giant. And 8 years later, I'm sitting here as we're obviously a much larger community here now, as an established title challenger, back in the Champions League, with expectations of the majority that is win the league this season. And I just still see such apathy amongst our fan base. You know, I really struggle with it. I love being an Arsenal fan at the moment. I think it's great. I look at fans of Man United and Chelsea and Tottenham and, to a lesser extent, last season and the season before, Liverpool as well. I look at fans of other clubs and think, we used to be them. Like, we used to be there, and they're spending more than us in the case of Chelsea or Manchester United, and they're not going anywhere. And yet, in the last 5 years, all Arsenal have done is move in a positive direction and go towards being title challengers and get to within 2 points of the greatest Premier League team and the greatest Premier League manager we've ever seen, in my opinion. And there's still so much, like, miserableness, if that's a word. And I struggle with that. I really do. And I don't know why. I don't know why so many people are still miserable and why so many people are still so down and critical and scrutinizing. And I guess maybe the trophy factor is the big one. It's the lack of that trophy that's there, that's not been won. I guess for many, is it? Maybe they're still getting bantered by some of their rival fan friends. Maybe that's it. I'm not. I mean, I am, but I'm secure, so I don't. It doesn't really bother me. But I think that, yeah, I struggle with it. I really do. I don't get it. I really don't get it. I'm desperate for the title. I'm desperate for the trophies. I am, just as much as the next guy. But I'm just really enjoying watching Arsenal. Just really enjoy watching being an Arsenal fan at the moment, and I'm really happy being an Arsenal fan. So I'm excited about our business. I'm excited about how the season might finish, and rather how the window might finish, and excited for our prospects. And I think we've got the right guy in charge, the right people behind the scenes, and the right players in the club. And I think we might add a couple more between now and the end of the window, which is also exciting. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. But let me know when you're watching on catch up. Anthony says, Tom, it's because we haven't won the league in 21 years and haven't brought in a prolific striker. Well, we have in that 21 years. We have brought in prolific strikers. We did that. We tried twice, actually, to do that. And first we tried with Alexandre Lacazette, who in France was scoring 25 plus goals, And so when we signed him for 50 million quid under Arsene Wenger, it was a case of Arsenal got their striker. Turns out he's not better than Giroud, sadly. So we went out 6 months later after losing Alexis Sanchez and brought in one of the best strikers that this world has seen in the last 20 years in terms of goal records, in Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang. And so, yeah, we actually, yes, we have gone out and done that. And we have gone out in that 21 years and signed the players that people have called out for. Aubameyang scored for Dortmund 25 goals, 39 goals, 40 goals, 21 goals. And for Arsenal in 2018-19 got 31 goals. Under Arteta in 2019-20 got 29 goals. So, yeah, we did go out and sign those players, Anthony. We got them. It didn't change anything. Because the thing that needed changing was not about an individual player that was going to transform this team. Because if that was true, Arsenal wouldn't have gone backwards under Aubameyang's tutelage as striker. The problem was far bigger than that. The problem was ingrained in the connection between the fans and the club. It was ingrained in the full scope of the team. It was ingrained in the persistent, monotonous, frustrating, aggravating defensive errors that would pop up every other game. And that's been taken out. And under this regime, we have reconnected, we have reunited, and we have reinforced this squad into the team that it is now. To a team that breaks goal records, that breaks win percentage records, and that positions itself in a world where two juggernauts, in the case of Real Madrid and Manchester City, stand in Arsenal's way of winning the trophies they want to win. And yes, there's frustrations about our performance in the League Cup because we've been knocked out by teams we shouldn't be knocked out by. Far less so in the FA Cup because it's been Liverpool and Man City that have knocked us out in our last 2 seasons, which I can make peace with personally. And Bayern Munich, of course, knocked us out in the Champions League last season, getting to a position in that competition we've not been in 14 years. So I just think there is maybe a level of entitlement and a level of not looking at the bigger picture that is being taken for granted somewhat. And I think actually people should be a lot more positive than they are about Arsenal, because if you're not enjoying it now and you're only ever going to enjoy it if we are lifting a Premier League title, sorry, but you're going to spend the majority of your football watching life pretty miserable. That's just the reality of it, sadly. So there you go. Anyway, I told you I'd be going for another 20 or so minutes, and we've done it. So thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. Really appreciate your time as always. Have a fantastic rest of your Thursday, and I look forward to joining you tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. again. I'll be bringing up any of the latest news from the last 24 hours. Maybe we'll have more on this Lookman story to get our teeth sunk into. I can tell you for a fact, if it does turn out to be more than just an Italian claim, we'll be doing our tactical breakdown of him. So you'll see Rich, I'm sure, back on the channel again to do our breakdowns. And yeah, thank you for tuning in. More than 2,000 of you listening concurrently. Crazy. You lot are a crazy bunch, and I love you all. So thank you for tuning in. Stay safe, stay well, stay happy, and stay respectful. And as always, up the Arsenal.